You get narwhals cruising along the flow edge. You get polar bears kind of walking along the edge, seals everywhere, lots of bird life. It's called the line of life, and it's where.
Welcome to Profoundly Pointless. My name is Nick. In this episode, we're going to go to the ends of the earth. Our guest is an Arctic and Antarctic explorer, wilderness guide, pilot, and photographer. We're going to talk about listening to humpback whales, life at 60 degrees below zero, and how these remote areas are changing and changing fast. This is Arctic and Antarctic wilderness guide, Natalie Gilles. Thank you for joining us. Like and subscribe if you get a chance. What's it like working up there?
So I work in Antarctica and the Arctic, kind of bipolar. I'll chase the 24 hours of daylight. So in the austral summers, I'll be down in Antarctica, and in the northern hemisphere summers, I'll be in the Arctic. I've done about 12 seasons in the Arctic now and 5 down in Antarctica, just chasing the daylight back and forth. And then what's it like up there? I don't know. It's really beautiful. Remote places, very sparsely populated, just serene, quiet. I like to think that it's like as far away on planet Earth as you can get from like a busy shopping mall or traffic.
I always get confused as to which one's north and which one's south. I mean, I know the North Pole is north and the South Pole is south, but the Arctic is above us and the
Yeah, Arctic is north, so North Pole is the Arctic and South Pole Antarctica.
So when you work up there though, is there just it's just you in a tent, or like what is the surroundings like?
It depends, I guess, what I'm doing up there. So I've done a variety of different things. I worked as an expedition guide, and while I've been guiding, that's self-supported. So living in a tent, cooking on a stove. Depending on the trip, it could either be hiking. So with the hiking trips, you're dropped off by a charter aircraft just with a backpack and kind of everything that you'd need for like 2 weeks in your backpack, and you just go hiking around. And yeah, you sleep in a tent. You just go wander around places that look interesting. It's just exploring. And then some trips I do will be canoeing, some would be sea kayaking. Others that aren't self-supported would be snowmobile trips out to, say, the flow edge to check out narwhal or polar bears. And then when I'm working up there as an aviator, we usually have a base that we stay at. So you can go flying all day and then come back to kind of like a dormitory style research base or a crew house. Every trip is different.
When I think about it, I'm just imagining kind of a barren, basically like a frozen desert. Is that essentially what it's like?
Very much depends where you are. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions about the Arctic and the Antarctic being very desolate, barren, kind of void of color, wasteland-like areas. But in some places they are. In some places they're very much not that. So if you go down to the Antarctic Peninsula, there's a higher concentration of wildlife than almost anywhere else on the planet. There's penguins, there's whales, there's so much color in the ice. It's actually like a just explosion of marine life that's happening in a really concentrated area. So there's a lot going on down there. And if you go up to the Arctic, there's beautiful colors in the rocks, and the tundra is alive with wildflowers if you go at the right time of the year, and animals are beautiful as well. So it depends very much where you're talking about, because there's quite a big umbrella when you talk about the Arctic and the Antarctic, but there's so much underneath that umbrella.
What drew you to it?
I first fell in love with kayaking when I was kind of a teenager. I grew up in the city, very much in a family of city people. And I just love the idea of going north. And I always had these stacks of National Geographic magazines. And I love the idea of exploring kind of what laid beyond the city. So I got really into sea kayaking. And if you're really into sea kayaking, going to the Arctic is kind of like going home. It's the place to go if you're really serious about sea kayaking. So I started off in the Arctic and then got some experience, and then started leading trips down in Antarctica as well.
The thing that would obviously jump out at me, right, is like, okay, but does the cold still steer people away, or is that kind of a draw for you?
Yeah, the cold. The cold is definitely a big part of it. I don't know. It's something I think that you get used to a little bit over time. It makes certain things a little bit easier. For example, like food preservation. It's a lot easier to be keeping food fresh if it's cold outside. Things don't spoil as easily, so you can take fresher food with you and overall have a better experience if you're eating well. So that's a consideration. It's a lot easier to dress for the cold than it is to, say, dress for the heat and have to like cool yourself down. It's always easier to layer up, so you have a little bit more control over your own personal climate, I'd say, in the cold. Down on the Antarctic Peninsula where I just was, it was really cold, so it was probably about -40 or so when we were up on the Antarctic plateau, which was really cold. And then you throw the wind chill in there and it gets, even colder. So it's a consideration for sure, but it's something that you just kind of start to live with, and it becomes less and less scary the more and more you're exposed to it.
Do you ever get used to the point where like you don't worry about it?
I think you always worry about it. It's always a consideration. When I'm working as a pilot, you have to think a little bit more about the airplane. So, for example, you want the battery to start. So you always have to kind of be thinking about keeping the battery warm so that, you can start your airplane to get to where you need to go.
Photographer, guide, pilot. Where are you landing?
Where are we landing?
Like you're just landing on ice?
Yeah. So it also depends. Like Arctic and Antarctic can be very different. So in the Arctic, you can think of that as sort of a land that's just surrounded by a lot of water. And most of our landings that we're doing up there are on big tundra tires. So really, really big tires, low inflation, so you can kind of bounce them down onto the tundra. So a lot of what we call off-strip work, so landing in places where there isn't a kind of conventional runway. And then any mix of stuff down in Antarctica, we're just landing on skis. So we've got these flat skis, and they pretty much let you land anywhere it's relatively flat, which is kind of nice.
I want to get into the photography aspect of it. So did you kind of set out initially to do the photography, or was that kind of a side effect of it? Like you kind of developed that over time?
The photography is definitely an afterthought. I'm very much drawn to the experiences of being out there, and photography is a way for me to help share and communicate the things that I find really beautiful and important about the places that I'm lucky enough to go to. Very much just a hobby thing. Like when I'm working as a guide, first and foremost, I'm guiding, and the safety of and the experience that my clients are having is first and foremost. And then if I can find some time in there to play with my camera, it's a bonus. But I also find it kind of enhances the experience a little bit. Like you can communicate to other people, like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Like, check out this composition. Hey, have you seen like this whale that I saw using my telephoto? Like, let's go check it out, kind of thing. So I think it helps enhance the experience, but it's definitely not why I'm going to these places or doing these things. It just happens to be a way that I've developed to share it.
The thing that jumped out at me looking at your Instagram was the animal pictures, right? Like that just fascinating to me. What kind of animals are you generally encountering?
When I'm down in Antarctica, the things I love photographing most are humpback whales. They're so cool. So usually I'm in my kayak and I've got a telephoto lens, so Sigma 150 to 600, and it kind of just lives like right in between my legs while I'm paddling along. And then if I'm lucky enough to see some whales, it's just a matter of taking it up and trying to get some of the whale shots, which are really fun. They're probably my favorite animal to photograph. They're just so intelligent and sentient. Sometimes they come up to right up to your kayak, and you've got a telephoto lens on, and it's like, well, this is useless because now the whale is too close for me for my lens. But they're really cool to photograph because they're an engaging whale. They're kind of goofy. They're not really scared of you. Like they're more curious than anything. So they're kind of fun. I like shooting penguins while I'm down there as well. There's tons of them. When I'm up in the Arctic, musk oxen are a really big one. They're just like such unique, kind of prehistoric looking animals that isn't really an animal that you would see anywhere else really on the planet. I love photographing them. They've got this big wispy fur that comes off of them. They look so beautiful when the wind plays with it. And then obviously the polar bears are a pretty big ticket one. They're fun to photograph, but they're also a little bit more challenging to photograph as well. So a little bit harder, but I don't know. I like it all.
How do they react to people? I would imagine, are they used to us? Or are they not used to us?
Very much depends where you are, what time of year, what else is going on around you. So my favorite time to photograph bears would be on the sea ice in springtime. So you get bears that they've come out of hibernation a long time ago. They're really, really well fed. There's a lot of seals and seal pups on the ice. So these bears are having like a buffet of their favorite foods around at all times. So they're not really that concerned with humans being around. They're still curious and investigative, but they're not actively hunting you, which makes it kind of a nice time to be out there and engaging with the animals because, you're not as concerned. There's still always an element of risk, but it's a time of year where it is a very opportune time to be photographing them.
Will the polar bears hunt you?
There's always a chance. If you spend enough time around them, you get to learn their behavior. So you can tell the difference between a bear that's skittish and doesn't want to have anything to do with you, versus a bear that's, say, protective of their cubs if they have any around. Or, you get like a big male bear that just is concerned with kind of being big and being in his territory. And then you get some of the curious juvenile bears that don't really know what humans are, and they're more so just interested. I think animals are a lot like people. They have a lot of personality, and it's maybe not so accurate to like throw big generalizations out like all polar bears are like this. They're just kind of like people. Sometimes you get people on good days, sometimes you get people on bad days, sometimes you get like really chilled out polar bears, and sometimes you get really angry ones. It just depends so much.
Now, are you purposely going out and saying like, okay, today I'm going to go get a picture of this bear, or I'm going to go get a picture of this animal? Or do you kind of have to just take opportunities as they come?
I'd say absolutely, or I'm just taking opportunities as they come. I think I learned pretty quickly that when you're in these places, it's not up to you. It's up to the weather. It's up to the conditions. It's up to the sea ice. And you're just there to experience it. Sometimes you don't get a single polar bear in 2 weeks, and sometimes you get like 3 or 4 a day. And it's just a matter of appreciating what you've got on that particular day with that set of conditions that you have in front of you. And, sometimes you really want to go like check out a polar bear that's a couple of miles in that direction, but the sea ice is too thin. So you just can't. And yeah, very much the weather is king up there. It dictates what you're doing and where you're going. So
are you ever in either of those places in winter, or what seasons do you generally are you going to go?
It does happen that I'm up there in the winter. I spent last winter working out of a small Inuit community called Resolute Bay, which is on Cornwallis Island in Nunavut. So I was working as a pilot up there. I was there when the sun set below the horizon for the last time for the winter. So it just dips below the horizon, and then there's 24 hours of darkness until it returns in the springtime. It's beautiful up there. You get some northern lights occasionally while you're flying. If there's a full moon out, it creates this like really beautiful silver light that just like blankets the entire tundra, and it's covered in snow. It's super beautiful, but it is cold. It's different.
Do you have to, when it's like that, because of the temperatures and the conditions, do you have to use any kind of specialized equipment, or are you like, nope, got this at Best Buy, this is going to work?
Right. So from a photography aspect, there isn't really anything that unique about my kit that would be any different from anyone in, say, the continental US would be using. So I use a Pelican case, which is like a hard shell case to keep my photography equipment in. And that's just a product of being able to throw it around and bang it. I'm pretty hard on my gear. So having that case, I can kind of not think about keeping my lenses protected as much because they're in their case, and I can just throw the case around and it's fine. In terms of the cold and my equipment, I just keep a lot of batteries, and I always have some tucked into pockets that are really close to my body. And once one dies, another one goes in, and they just get swapped out. And I'll usually have like 6 or 8 of them on my body at any one time. So if one of them conks out on me and there's like an amazing polar bear in front of me, it's just a matter of having to pull another one out and put it in. But other than that, there's nothing else that's really specialized about my equipment. It's really actually kind of nice being out there because it's so dry. So there isn't a lot of moisture that can get into the lenses or anything.
So when you say guiding somebody, right? Like, oh, okay. But are you guiding them because to a certain area because they don't know? I guess, why are you guiding them? In the sense that, like, man, you really got to know what you're doing up here, or no, this is how you get to this place?
They're generally pretty specialized areas. So the average recreationalist would perhaps need a specialized set of skills in order to successfully achieve their goals. So if they want to kayak in the sea ice is kind of particular just because it can get blown around so much by the winds. There's currents. There's a unique set of skills that is involved with safely maneuvering through sea ice. So that's one pretty easy example of why someone would hire a guide for that kind of trip. You get a lot of people signing up for sort of commercial tours because financially it makes a little bit more sense to split the overhead costs with a small group of people. So say you have someone that really wants to explore this national park, call it a $20,000 charter to take an aircraft up there. So if they can split that with 6 people and they get a guide, it makes a little bit more sense. And there's also the camaraderie as well. These trips tend to be small, like-minded groups of people, so you get to know and have some companions for your adventure, which is always really good. Safety is a really big aspect of it. I'm a certified wilderness first responder, so kind of like medical in the field stuff, have those set of skills that are really good to have in these places that are really, really remote that you might not be able to get a helicopter to if you needed to for a medical evacuation, for example. So lots of reasons.
Where are you generally going?
All over. It's a pretty big map. In the Arctic, I was doing a lot of expeditions on Ellesmere Island, which, if you think of Canada, it's kind of like pointed like this on the map. It's the last island, last big island before the North Pole. And then you've got Baffin Island in the Eastern Arctic. Was another really big focus of mine. Down in the Antarctic, I've spent quite a few seasons kayaking on the Antarctic Peninsula, which is that big piece of land that juts out towards South America. And then most recently while I was down there, I was taking people back and forth to the South Pole. A lot of climbers in and out of Mount Vincent, which is the highest mountain in Antarctica, so people that would want to climb that. Depends. All over the place.
Are you ready for some harder / listener submitted questions?
Let's go.
What would you say is your scariest experience?
Oh boy. I'd say being out on the sea ice in the springtime in the Canadian Arctic overall is probably the scariest experience. The sea ice is getting less and less predictable. Even in the short time that I've been guiding up in the Arctic, it's less and less predictable. And if it's less and less predictable, it's scarier and scarier, because in my mind, things are scary if you don't understand them. And it's getting harder and harder to really understand what's going on with the sea ice because the conditions are changing so rapidly. So I'd say being out on the sea ice is probably one of the scariest. You've got like a set depth of ice that you're living on, you're sleeping on, you're traveling on. Sometimes it gets thinner in certain areas. Sometimes it gets thicker in certain areas. You don't really know. There's not really a way of knowing exactly how deep the ice is underneath you without being able to actually prod it. So being out on the sea ice and traveling over it is probably one of the scariest things that I've been doing recently.
Okay, I'm going to reveal my ignorance. So I guess when you say sea ice, like I'm imagining like just ice floating in the water. But this is more like frozen parts of the ocean that you're kind of basically living on.
Yeah, exactly that. So you get areas of land, and in between those areas of land, the ocean, it's so cold in the winter that the ocean freezes over completely. And the goal of these trips is to go to where the frozen ocean ends, because it ends really, really abruptly. So you get frozen ocean to a point called the flow edge, which is where the ice ends and the open water begins. And that's a really interesting area because that's where you get the biggest concentration of wildlife. So you get narwhals cruising along the flow edge, you get polar bears kind of walking along the edge, seals everywhere, lots of bird life. It's called the line of life, and it's where like the coolest stuff is happening in the Arctic. So when I refer to being out on the ice, I'm kind of referring to going out over to the sea ice where all the cool animals are hanging out.
Leads us into this question. Hardest animal to get a photograph of?
Narwhal. That's kind of an easy one. So when you're out on the sea ice, you're walking around on the ice, and whales are really, really sensitive to sound. They can hear what's going on the surface above them. So unless you're like really, really quiet, they can hear your footsteps. And a lot of these times the narwhal don't like being around humans, so they try to avoid them. So trying to get a photograph of a narwhal is very, very challenging. One thing that I've done is if you stick around a pod of narwhal for a long time, you can kind of check out and start to understand their feeding habits. You notice that they'll go under the ice, they'll feed, and then because they're holding their breath while they're under the ice, they'll have to come up for a breath of air. So if you think like a narwhal, you're under the ice, you're feeding, you really, really want to have a breath, you're probably going to come up at the edge of the ice at a place where it's like the most convenient, like the first breath that you can take. So you try and find a spot on the sea ice that kind of cuts out at like a V, and the narwhal will typically come up at the, angle of that V, which is the first place that they can have a breath. So I've done it before where you can get a group of people, and if you're really, really still for like half an hour, you can lay on your belly on the side of the sea ice, kind of with your elbows like hanging over the edge. And it's happened a couple times that I've had narwhal come straight up and almost blow like straight into your face because they just surface right there. It's a really cool experience because, you're sitting there silent for like 20, 30 minutes, hoping maybe you might get a narwhal, maybe you won't. And then just like out of absolutely nowhere, they just like right in your face. It's really cool.
And then are they gone in an instant, or do they like linger for a second?
Gone. Gone.
Have,
They might take like a breath or two and then they're gone. Really hard to photograph.
have you ever like left the lens cap on? Been like, oh crap.
Have I left the lens cap on? I don't really use lens caps. Not really for a reason. I just lose them so often that I don't have them. But I've done every stupid thing that you can think of. I've gone out without batteries. I've gone out without memory cards. I've deleted whole memory cards, like full of incredible, wonderful photographs. Just like, that's gone now.
Which one do you like more, North Pole or South Pole?
But which do I like better? They're so different for many, many different reasons. I'd say for wildlife, I like Antarctica, and for landscape, I like the Arctic.
And just to confirm, Antarctica is south and north. The Arctic is north. I really thought they were the same thing. I honestly did, right? It's amazing how you can go to college and you still don't know anything about the world.
You're really not alone in that at all. Actually, what I find really funny is, so polar bears, they only live in the Arctic. There's no polar bears down in Antarctica. But it's amazing how many people you'll have on like a 2-week kayak trip in Antarctica. And at the end of the trip, we'll be like, yeah, everything was great. Great food, great guiding, wonderful. But like, we didn't see any polar bears. That's like one of their key complaints. And then to be like, oh, well, God. Yeah, it's a
God
thing.
Dang, have you ever had somebody like book the trip specifically to see polar bears and then realize like, oh crap, picked the wrong.
I don't think specifically, but you definitely get some people who haven't done a great deal of research, which, I mean, it just leaves them an opportunity to go to the north and be able to compare the two and hopefully see a polar bear up there.
Is it oversaturated at all? Do you think like, wait a minute, there's too many people coming up here now?
You know what? I've always really thought that people care about beautiful places and they care about places that they formed an attachment to. So are there too many people going up there? I don't think so, because I think that the people that are going up there are having an experience that they're going to remember through the rest of their lives. And they're going to go home and they're going to tell their friends all over the globe, hey, I just had this really cool experience, like seeing this iceberg, like seeing these penguins, seeing these polar bears in their natural habitats. It's beautiful. I've talked to the local people and they're saying, you know what, like things are changing really, really rapidly up here. And they're sharing those messages with people that who wouldn't be able to see or experience those places otherwise. So I don't think it's oversaturated up there, because I think that the people that are going up there are having experiences that are meaningful. So the more people that have more meaningful experiences and care about these really beautiful places, the more people will be caring about them and maybe more willing to make changes. So I don't think so.
That's really all the questions that we got. What's kind of coming up next for you? How can people get some of your artwork if they want a guided trip? What should they do?
So I'm heading back up to the Arctic to do some wheel ski work. So a lot of flying, potentially like some field caching, just general aviation work up in the Arctic. I'm also hoping to do a little bit more photography while I'm up there. Maybe see some muskox, see some polar bears. I've also got a little project I'm working on right now where I've taken my photographs and I've translated them into stickers that I have for sale. And I also have a book of poems that I wrote, actually during COVID. So while I was stuck at home and people weren't traveling to the North Pole or South Pole or in the polar regions, I did a master's degree in poetry, and I came up with my book. It's called This Is Where Atlantis Sank, and it's a book of poetry and photography. So that's for sale on my website.